I have said this so many times that it should go without saying at this point. Women's college basketball is not popular. The WNBA damn sure ain't popular. Caitlin Clark is the driving force behind the elevation of both.
Did you see what just happened to women's college basketball ratings? They're in free fall. And it's because one player left the game. You might be thinking, no way, it can't be that bad. But the numbers are shocking. There's been a huge drop in viewership for top games since Caitlin Clark stays on the court. What's going on? Is women's basketball struggling? Without its superstars, Clark didn't just light up the court, she transformed the game, and fans couldn't get enough. Let's look at the numbers because they're going to blow your mind. When Clark played, 582,000 people tuned in. That's not just good, that's NFL level competition. Can you believe it? A college women's basketball player pulling in crowds that rival pro football. That's the Caitlin Clark effect for you.
Do you want me to just say I told you so, or are you willing to say, Stephen A, you did tell me? Really? Caitlin Clark is the golden goose?
But now everything is falling apart.
Last Sunday, the former Katie Roos from Iowa, they played Virginia Tech on ESPN2. They drew an abysmal 209,000 viewers.
Just imagine top games are barely scraping 209,000 viewers. That's a staggering 64% dropout. It's like the excitement just vanished overnight. You might be thinking maybe it's just a bad game or two. Nope, this isn't a one-time thing. We're seeing this trend everywhere, and it's only getting worse.
The game between Iowa and Toledo last week, 136,000 viewers.
That's right, when Iowa played to only 136,000 people tuned in. That's less than a quarter of what Clark pulled in. It's like the air got sucked out of the arena, and nobody bothered to turn on their TVs.
I wasn't watching women's basketball last season until the tournament. I am damn sure not watching this season now that Caitlin Clark has moved on. But judging by the ratings, I am not the only one that's not watching. No one else is watching either.
Now you might be wondering if there's some other explanation. Maybe the games are at different times or on different channels. Nope, here's where it gets really interesting. These games, they're in the same time slots on the same channels as when Clark played. Nothing's changed except one thing: no more Caitlin Clark.
But KC, they were on the Big Ten Network. No one watches that channel either. Oh yeah? Well, Caitlin Clark was drawing an audience on the Big Ten Network last season.
Some people argue that it's too early to judge the future of college basketball since it's just the early season. But isn't that what they said about the NBA? And yet it's still struggling. Ratings are dropping heavily.
These returns are very early. We only have ratings available for 2 nationally televised games. Right now, is there cause for concern? No. Right now, should anyone be worried? No. However, the media said the same thing after ratings for opening week in the NBA were in the pooper, and here we are 3 weeks later, and the NBA is still a huge embarrassing failure.
Many also argue that some of these games overlap with the NFL, but remember, Caitlin Clark faced the same conditions, and she didn't just compete with NFL ratings, she crushed them.
Well, KC, they were competing against the NFL, plus that game was on ESPN2. That channel's hard to find because it's next to ESPN, which is another network that no one is watching. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But last season, Caitlin Clark was competing against the NFL when her first nationally televised game was broadcast on ESPN2, meaning Caitlin Clark was dealing with the same conditions that the former Roos were dealing with last Sunday. Yet, somehow, Caitlin Clark was able to draw 583,000 viewers.
One player can have such a massive impact. What does that say about the sport? Is it too relying on star power? And what happens when the next big star moves on? Women's college basketball feels like a one-woman show that just lost its leading lady with no understudy to draw the same crowds.
I have said this so many times that it should go without saying at this point. Women's college basketball is not popular. The WNBA damn sure ain't popular. Caitlin Clark is the driving force behind the elevation of both.
So what's next? That's the million-dollar question. Will another player step up and capture the nation's attention like Clark did, or are we watching the start of a serious rating slump for women's college basketball? One thing's for sure, everyone's going to be watching those numbers very closely in the coming weeks. The game might be the same, but without Caitlin Clark, it's a whole new ball game. That's not all. The media kept pushing names like Paige Buers and Angel Reese as the next big thing, but guess what? The ratings and attendance numbers are telling a completely different story. Are we looking at a sport that can't survive without a once-in-a-generation superstar?
We have seen the mainstream media downplay the impact of Caitlin Clark.
Let's take Angel Reese, for example. Remember her? The media couldn't stop talking about her, acting like she was the next Caitlin Clark. But here's the shocking truth. She couldn't even sell out home games at LSU. Can you believe it? One of the biggest names in women's college basketball, and there were still empty seats in the arena.
Now, that lack of ability, it is the one thing that carried over with Angel Reese to the WNBA, because she was not selling out home games in the high school gym in Chicago either.
Are you hearing that? You might be thinking, okay, but that's just college ball. But what about when she went pro? Well, hold on to your hats, because it gets even crazier. Reese moved to the WNBA, and you'd think she'd be packing the house. Right? Wrong. Even in smaller venues, the crowds just weren't showing up like everyone expected. It's like the star power that seems so bright and college just fizzled out. And it's not just Reese. The media kept pushing other names too, like they were trying to create the next big star. Paige Bucker was another one they couldn't stop talking about. But here's the thing, the numbers don't lie. No matter how much hype these players got, they just weren't pulling in the viewers like Clark did.
The media has tried to credit anyone not named Caitlin Clark for the rise of women's basketball. But once again, we were given further proof that women's basketball struggles to draw flies to a fresh turd without Caitlin Clark.
So, what's really going on here? It's starting to look like women's basketball isn't just struggling, it's showing us how much it relies on star power, and not just any star power, but the kind of once-in-a-generation talent that comes along maybe once every decade.
You can come up with any excuse that you want, but the truth is, women's college basketball, it's not as popular without Caitlin Clark. Basketball, more than any other sport, it is heavily reliant on star power. When you don't have star power, you don't have an audience.
Think about it. When's the last time you heard someone say, I can't wait to watch the Aces play, instead of I can't wait to see A.A. Wilson? It's always about the individual players, not the teams, and that's a problem, because what happens when that star player graduates or retires or gets injured? The whole sport takes a hit.
If you don't believe me, just look at what has happened to men's college basketball in the last 10 or 15 years. The one and done rule in the NBA, it has destroyed men's basketball.
This isn't just about college basketball anymore. It's a huge warning sign for the WNBA, too, if they can't figure out how to build interest in the game itself, not just in individual players. They're in for a rough ride.
This is just the ratings for 2 games in November. It's too early to be concerned. There's nothing to worry about yet. But this is a critical season for women's college basketball, and what happens this season in women's college basketball, it could foreshadow what happens in the future for the WNBA dump.
The WNBA's got a new challenger, and it's not just another college star. While everyone's been watching Caitlin Clark, a real threat's been growing right under their noses. It's called the Unrivaled League, and it's shaking things up in ways the WNBA never saw coming.
It's similar to the Big Three League that's owned by Ice Cube, except Unrivaled will feature current WNBA players, while the Big Three features real basketball players that used to play in the NBA.
For 30 years, the WNBA had no real competition, but now the Unrivaled League's changing the game. You might think it's just some 3-on-3 games. Right, wrong, this league's got serious backing, and it's making the WNBA nervous.
But privately, I am wondering if Kat Engelbert is concerned. Hell, for their sake, I hope she is concerned. If my dumbass thought of this apocalyptic scenario, I would hope people smarter than me would also think of this.
Here's where it gets wild. The Unrivaled League has the backing of TNT money. Yes, the same TNT that once held the NBA broadcasting rights but lost them. Now they're hungry for a comeback and looking for payback in a big way. Imagine if TNT decides to go all in on this new league with their resources and influence. They could completely shift the landscape of the sport, sparking a new era that could rival anything we've seen before.
Some sort of revenge is on their mind. You're obviously never going to hurt the NBA. NBA is far too powerful. Their foundation is firmly established. You could launch a new basketball league and it would not put a dimple on the NBA's gigantic ass. But if TNT wanted revenge on the NBA, the one way they could get that revenge, going after the WNBA.
Imagine what that means for the WNBA. Suddenly they're facing a league that could pay players more in one game than they'd make in a whole season. And get this, the Unrivaled League season ends before the WNBA's even starts. Players could do both. The WNBA is not just fighting for fans anymore, they're fighting to keep their own players focused.
Outside of playing overseas, where you risk experiencing a months-long vacation with Vlad Pooter, your only option's been to play in the WNBA dump. With the emergence of Unrivaled, and this could especially be the case if Unrivaled is successful, the WNBA is going to have real competition for the very first time. And I'm not talking about competition on the court.
You might ask, is this really such a big deal? But that's exactly the point. The WNBA's never had to deal with this before. They've always been the only game in town. Now they're in uncharted territory.
What if Unrivaled takes off? What if Unrivaled becomes a competitor to the WNBA?
And think about it, if the Unrivaled League takes off, what happens? Do the best players jump ship? Do fans start choosing Unrivaled over WNBA games? What about all those sponsors and TV deals? So, next time you're watching a WNBA game, remember there's way more at stake than just the score. The league's facing its biggest challenge yet, and how they handle it could change everything. The WNBA needs to make its next move carefully, because now they're not just playing for wins, they're playing to survive. Let's talk about what Clark brings to the table. We're not just talking about her incredible scoring ability or her court vision. Clark's got the potential to inspire a whole new generation of players. Imagine young girls across the country picking up a basketball because they want to be like Caitlin. That's the kind of impact we're talking about. But it's not just about inspiration. Clark's got a chance to change the entire landscape of women's basketball. Think about it. If she joins the Unrivaled League, she could force the WNBA to reevaluate everything from player salaries to marketing strategies. She wouldn't just be joining a team. She'd be kickstarting a whole new era in women's sports.
But if TNT wanted revenge on the NBA, the one way they could get that revenge, going after the WNBA, offering WNBA players triple the money, quadruple the money. Hell, in the case of Caitlin Clark, if she accepts Unrivaled's offer, she could potentially make more in one game than the WNBA is paying her through the entire season. Again, I don't know if this is the case.
The WNBA is counting on Clark to boost their ratings. They're probably already planning marketing campaigns, jersey designs, the whole 9 yards. But what if she doesn't show up? What if Clark decides to take her talents to the unrivaled league. Instead, it would shake up the world of women's basketball like never before, and let's not forget about Clark's legacy. Right now, she's got a chance to do something nobody's ever done before. She could be the player who changed the game, who forced the old guard to wake up and take notice in the unrivaled league. Clark wouldn't just be a star player. She'd be blazing a trail for others to follow.
Yes, it's in your off season. Yes, it's a 3-on-3 league instead of a traditional basketball league. But that does not mean Unrivaled will be 3-on-3 forever. Just because they are playing in your off season now, that does not mean that will be the case going forward. If you're TNT and you want revenge on Adam Silver in the NBA, the only way you could go about doing it is going after the WNBA, which is the weakest link.
This isn't just about one player's decision anymore, it's about the future of women's professional basketball. If Clark jumped ship, others might follow. Suddenly, the WNBA isn't just losing a star, they're facing a potential shift in the entire sport, and finally, TNT could get their revenge.
Seems to be serious heat between the network and the league. Guess who is financially backing Unrivaled? Guess who will be the exclusive television home to Unrivaled? TNT. If some sort of revenge is on their mind, you're obviously never going to hurt the NBA. NBA is far too powerful. Their foundation is firmly established. You could launch a new basketball league and it would not put a dimple on the NBA's gigantic ass. But if TNT wanted revenge on the NBA, the one way they could get that revenge, going after the WNBA.
So what's Clark going to do? Nobody knows for sure, but one thing's certain, her next move is going to send ripples through the sport. The WNBA is holding its breath. The Unrivaled League is waiting eagerly, and fans everywhere are on the edge of their seats. This is bigger than basketball. It's about the evolution of women's sports, about creating new opportunities and challenging the status quo, and it all comes down to one player's decision. So the next time someone tells you Caitlin Clark's future is set in stone, remember this: in the world of professional sports, nothing's certain until the contract's signed, and right now that pen's still in Clark's hand. So here's the deal: women's basketball is standing at a crossroads, and the next move could change everything we've seen. The ratings nosedive without Caitlin Clark. It's like someone turned off the lights at a party, and now there's this new Unrivaled League lurking in the shadows, ready to shake things up. You might be thinking, is this the end for women's basketball? But hold on, this game's far from over. The ball's in the core, the players, the leagues, and yes, you the fans. What happens next? That's the million-dollar question.
What do you think? Is that a possibility? Also, do you think women's college basketball will struggle this season without Caitlin Clark?
Will a new star step up and ignite the crowds like Clark did? Can the WNBA fend off this new competition? And what about Clark herself? Will she stick with the try and true or jump ship to the new league? These are the questions keeping basketball execs up at night. One thing for sure, women's basketball is changing and fast, so keep your eyes on the court, because the next play could be a game changer. The future of women's basketball, it's being written right now, and you're watching it unfold in real time.